But I'm going to start with Stewart. Stewart's been CEO of the airport for...
Well, I joined the day that the ownership changed, which was back in December of 2009, so just over 3 years.
So it's 3 years, your third birthday was just in December last year, and where have you got to so far in terms of the airport's development plans?
I think in the first 3 years of separate ownership, very much what we've been trying to do is to establish a standalone business, separate from the BAA monopoly, which previously owned not only Stansted, Gatwick and Heathrow, but also some of the Scottish airports as well. So our focus really has been on separating Gatwick away, making it a standalone entity in its own right, separating an awful lot of IT systems, and then going about trying to transform the airport. And one of the biggest features of that has been the investment programme, which I think for anybody in the room who's travelled through the airport, you're likely to have perhaps experienced some disruption, but hopefully more latterly experienced the benefit of the investment that we've made. If you look at the investment to date, in 3 short years, under new ownership, we've now invested close to £1 billion in upgrading the facilities at the airport. That's been spread across, I think Paul mentioned some investment in the rail station. That should complete by about February or March time of next year. We've done that in partnership with Network Rail, right across the North Terminal, the South Terminal, and out on the airfield. And really the focus of the investment has been trying to upgrade the airport, which frankly, when we first got there, felt tired. It just felt well used, quite worn out, and just in need of being refreshed and refurbished. So a big emphasis for us has really been on that investment programme. As we look forward, we continue to invest about £1 million every working day in upgrading the facilities, and we'll continue to do that for the foreseeable future. We're currently having discussions with our airlines and with the regulator, and as I look forward the next 5 years, I see no reason why we shouldn't be running at that sort of investment level. And of course what that's then enabled us to do is to drive the service levels that we provide to customers going through the airport. And if you look at the service performance that we have at Gatwick today, it's radically different to where it was 3.5 years ago. Yeah. You know, the security queues have been transformed. We have an array of service level agreements that we have between the airport and the airlines. We actually meet every single one of those today, whereas 3.5 years ago, the airport routinely missed 40% of them. No other London airport can compete with that. And then on the back of that service performance, it's enabled us to grow the business. So despite the economic headwinds that I'm sure everybody in this room has faced over the last 3.5 years, we're one of those unusual businesses where we've actually grown our volume, grown the connectivity, and brought in new airlines. So if I look back to, say, 2010, we did about 31 million passengers. Last year we did 34.2 million passengers, and currently we're growing at about 5% this year. And that's on the back of not only the existing airlines, but it's also on the back of bringing in new airlines, and that wouldn't have been achieved if it hadn't been for the staff of the airport offering better service levels and for the investment going in and improving the facilities. And if you look at the airlines that we've brought in, it's the likes of Norwegian, switching down from Stansted, now not only connecting to all of the Scandinavian capitals, offering very competitive fares, but also starting to spread their wings to compete with EasyJet and British Airways head on. They're basing aircraft at the airport this year. But it's also reaching out and bringing in new flag carriers. So the likes of Lufthansa are flying the summer seasons. The likes of Turkish Airlines joined us about 1.5 years ago, initially flying 1 service per day across to Istanbul. But today they're actually flying 3 services every day.
Competition and regulation. I'll ask you a little bit about competition first of all. The whole idea of the breakup of the airports was that it increased competition. Has that been achieved, or is it still to some extent constrained at the moment?
Well, I think for us, the breakup of the airports and the breakup of the monopoly was all about trying to create competition between the airports and in turn create competition between the airlines. And then the result of that obviously being to benefit the passenger in terms of price, service level that they experience as they fly to and from an airport or with an airline. What we've tried to do over the last 3.5 years is to work exceptionally hard to improve our service levels and to put space between us and Heathrow and us and Stansted, and to differentiate the services that we offer. So the likes of the new premium security lanes that we have in the South Terminal, the family and assistance lanes that we have going through security in the South Terminal, some of the toilet facilities we've put into the airports, the use of IT through the passenger journey, making it more high-tech but easier to use, are some examples where we've really tried to differentiate the experience of a passenger going through the Gatwick Airport versus the other ones. Still a lot of road in front of us, and many initiatives that we're putting in place to continue to put that space between us and the other airports. So to some extent it's working, but of course Stansted Airport has only just been sold. Yeah. And what we expect to see now is to see Stansted really step up to the mark. They've really been, for us, a rich picking ground. We've literally, look at the airlines that are flying out of Stansted, and we've just targeted them one by one and tried to persuade those airlines to not only move down to Gatwick, but to move and then grow and expand their businesses at Gatwick. And that's happened quite effectively. EasyJet would be one of the good examples of that. Norwegian would be another good example of that. So we definitely have a competitive threat from Stansted with new ownership there. And I think if you look across to Heathrow, the competitive threat we have there is that quietly in the background, Heathrow haven't only got T5 open, but next year they'll open T2, which in itself is a £2.5 billion project. And of course what we're trying to do is compete on the one hand with Stansted, essentially around the low-cost carriers, which are increasingly offering the connectivity on a European basis. But on the other hand, we're trying to compete with Heathrow to bring in these long-haul services, particularly to the emerging economies. So, we're right in the middle of quite an intense competition. But for us, what we really need to see happen is for the regulator, because these airports were regulated as a monopoly, to step back, basically to get out of the way, and just to allow us to really compete and follow through on offering better deals to airlines, incentive deals to actually grow volumes at the airport, to get better connectivity for the UK, and to take away some of the unnecessary bureaucracy that regulation brings with us. We're lobbying very hard as we actually speak this year to try to break the shackles of regulation and to try to free ourselves so that we can behave in an ever more commercial manner. So that's a big debate that's live now. We think we will make progress on that this year. We don't think we'll free ourselves totally from regulation, but we're certainly pushing ourselves to achieve that. And I think it's really this bureaucracy that exists around what was formerly in place for a monopoly that we need to try to break, and just make ourselves a more efficient organisation, an organisation which is more fleet of foot, and an organisation that can respond better to passenger needs.
And what chance of success against the regulator?
Well, what we've done is, you see, if you say you don't want to be as heavily regulated, people start to be quite concerned and say, well, the risk is the airport will gouge on price, they'll drop service levels, and they'll stop investing. That's the threat. Well, we have no intention whatsoever of doing any of those three things. So what we've done is put in place a series of commitments where we commit a price level, we commit a service level which is actually higher than today, and we commit on the investment programme how we'll consult with the airlines. And by putting those commitments in place, I think we've really got the regulator thinking now about how they can step back and how they can give us the space to compete. They put a document out around about 2 weeks ago where they actually said this framework that we've proposed, where it's legally binding, but it's essentially done on a voluntary basis, is something that they welcome. And they can see how that would replace the heavy hand of regulation, which having broken up the airports really is unnecessary. It'd be a travesty if you actually break up the ownership of the airports and then you just regulate them as though they were still a monopoly. That couldn't possibly be the right outcome. So as we go forwards, we think we'll make progress on this agenda.
Absolutely.